Hey, Rifters, welcome to the show. Subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcasts. Tell a friend. We're trying to get those reviews up. And yeah, I'm very excited for today's guest. You've heard him for 18 years on the Kevin and Bean show on K Rock. You could also hear him on Babylon with Kevin Smith and Ralph Garman. And you've seen him on movies like Tusk, Ted, A Million Ways in the West to Die. He also has his own podcast called The Ralph Garman Report, or The Ralph Report by Ralph Garman. And this is so exciting because growing up, I would always listen to him when I go to work. And yeah, just one of those. He was like my Fraser Smith. So my generation's Fraser Smith, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm very excited, and this is going to be fun. You've also heard him on Family Guy. The great Ralph Garman is going to be here, and he's going to riff with me. All right, guys, I'm really excited, and please support the podcast. I really do need help with these reviews. The reviews help me get more guests, and they kind of make me feel good. Like I like reading reviews. So yeah, feedback is encouraged. All right, guys. So subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, and enjoy Reza Riffs with Ralph Garman.
From Hollywood, California, welcome to Reza Riffs with your host, Keith Reza.
Hi, Ralph Garman.
Hey, Keith, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, sir.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
I was saying in the intro that how you were my generation, like you were my Fraser Smith. You know what I mean? So I think like that's just so cool. So it's a real honor to meet you and talk to you. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you because I know before you started radio, you were doing bartending and stuff, and then you kind of got thrown into it.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you like at what point did you start to like it?
Good question. I think pretty early on. I had a lot of misconceptions about what the gig was. Jimmy Kimmel was responsible for hooking me up with Kevin and Bean, which is the morning show I did here in Los Angeles. And I had never heard the show because, as you mentioned, I was a bartender. That was my straight gig while I was auditioning for acting jobs and stuff. So I would sleep in till noon. I never heard morning radio.
Yeah.
And Jimmy came to me and said, "Yeah, you should. Adam and I are leaving to go do a show called The Man Show on Comedy Central. And so Kevin and Bean need people who can write and do voices and impressions and stuff. And you ever consider, working in radio? And for me, radio, I always thought was a DJ doing time and temperature and doing lead-ins to records and stuff. And it
That's
was
what I
nothing
thought too. Yeah.
nothing I was interested in at all. And he said, "No, it's like comedy boot camp. You have to create stuff every day, and you're writing and you're performing, and it would be good for you to give it a shot." So, look, I was bartending or it was doing radio. Those were my options. And I said, "Well, we'll give it a shot." And the guys weren't sold on me either because I had no radio background. And so we all sort of agreed that we would do a 6-month trial. And if anybody wasn't happy on either side of the equation, then we would shake hands, no hard feelings, and go our separate ways. But 6 months turned into 18 years. So pretty soon into it, I was like, this is fun. I get to perform every day and I get to write my own stuff and I get to do my voices and impressions and things. And so very early on, I recognized what a fun opportunity it was.
Yeah. So like I wanted to ask you because like I do stand up. So like when you write jokes and stuff, you kind of get a live audience feel on it where radio, it's kind of like you gotta believe in the stuff you wrote to see if it works because you can't tell if people like it unless they're in the station. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It is hard initially because I had come up in sketch comedy and improv in
Yeah.
front of a live audience. So similarly, right away whether something's working or not. So you do kind of have to trust your instincts. But as you mentioned, especially on a show like the one I did, there are a bunch of people in the room. You have Kevin and Bean, the two hosts, and then you've got board ops and a bunch of people. And you can gauge, when you're getting laughs in the room, whether at least the people you're working with find it funny. And then pretty soon you get responses from the audience via email and people calling into the station and stuff. So you get an idea what works and what doesn't. But It does teach you to trust your instincts, certainly.
For
And,
sure.
you have to, do what makes you laugh. That's the only guidelines I had really was like, do I think this is funny? Well, then I hope other people do too.
Yeah. And would you say like with the form of the internet and technology, because I know like in the beginning where there wasn't any, like you just listen to radio and then the internet and technology, like probably the ratings or the numbers probably dipped a little. Like, would you say like that kind of hurt radio in a way?
Not for us while I was there. I started at the end of the 90s, very beginning of the 2000s. And I guess about halfway through my stay in radio, we were the number one rated morning show in Los Angeles and had a massive audience. So you have to remember, this is sort of pre podcast. And there were some people who were experimenting with satellite radio. Some people would go over to Sirius XM, especially when Howard
Stern,
Stern
yeah.
went over there and drew a lot of people over who were fans of his. But our ratings stayed pretty strong up until right around when they finally let me go. And that was, 2017, 2018. And that's when I first started to notice that there was a big shift in the business model and in ratings and in the audience sizes. So they fired me. But in reality, I think they did me a favor because terrestrial radio now is just in the worst shape it's ever been.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't even think I listen to radio anymore.
I
Like,
don't think anybody does really. There's so many options. And, it's funny. Towards the end of my run there, Kevin Smith and I went to the powers that be at the radio station and said, we want to do a show where we just talk about show business and joke with each other and do recurring segments and stuff. Give us your worst time slot. Give us 2 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. Give us overnights on Saturday. Whenever nobody's listening, give us a shot and let us try to build an audience because we think this would be entertaining. And the program director said, nobody wants to hear people talk. They just want to hear music, and it's got to be fast paced and long form talking about different subjects. No one's ever going to want to listen to that. And obviously he was wrong because the
for sure.
podcast boom happened shortly after that. And even the show that Kevin and I ended up doing as a podcast, Hollywood Babylon's been running for almost 15 years now.
Yeah. I had one more radio question, then I wanted to transition to the
Sure.
Babylon. But like I totally agree because like I think people like I like hearing people talk. I think especially when I drive, it keeps me up, keeps me engaged and like I'm kind of a loner. So like when I'm hearing these talks, I feel like I'm in the conversation. You know what I mean?
Of course, that's the magic of radio is it's the most intimate medium, in my opinion, that is out there of all the mass media. And I think that's why podcasts do so well, because it captures that feeling of there are people talking directly to you and you're engaged in a conversation. And the
Yeah.
thought that people weren't interested in that or had lost interest in that couldn't have been further from the truth. There's no evidence to back that up. People, if it's engaging, if it's well done, if it's entertaining, people will lock in and they like hearing people communicate with each other. And you get very attached to people
Yeah.
that way. I mean, our audience was so strong in radio because they felt like we were friends. We were in their carpool, basically. They were driving to work with us every day or heading to school with us every day. And that is what radio, it's funny, the biggest changes in terrestrial radio has been cutting local DJs and ending long running shows. And the very thing that makes that medium work, in my opinion, is those personalities and those talents. And they're stripping that all away in the guise of saving a few dollars in salaries here and there. And it's killing the product.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, in a way, like you said, it's a blessing in disguise because now podcasting, I feel, has really taken over radio. And it's also, in a way, taken over late night television. You know?
Yeah,
So I think like it's kind of like for guys like me who do stand up and podcasting, it really helps me.
sure.
But I can't imagine like if I would have the same success if I started when because you can't stay the same age forever. So when radio was popular, I was a child. You know what I mean?
Right. No, of course. And every show has a shelf life. By the end of the time that I was done there, the writing was on the wall that, Kevin and Bean had been together for almost 30 years. I had been there almost 20. And you garner a large audience, people are faithful, but you're not getting new people. You know, there's a lot of people who got older and found other forms of entertainment or found other broadcasters that they connected up with. So, you know, even the biggest names in the business, eventually the steam runs out of that show. So at the time when I was fired, I thought it was the end of the world. But like I mentioned, they were really doing me a favor because they pushed me into podcasting, and I've been flourishing there ever since. And shortly after they fired me, the whole show kind of fell apart, and there's nobody there anymore that was there
Oh
when I
yeah,
was.
definitely.
So
I remember that too, because I don't remember who left, Kevin or Bean, but I remember one of them did a sideshow, and then like 10 weeks later they got fired like immediately. So I
yeah,
was
Bean left, he retired, and then Kevin was sort of doing it on his own, and then they also shit canned him and broke that show up too. So short term bad decision making decimated that whole morning show.
yeah. But talking about blessings in disguise, then you and Kevin Smith were friends, and you guys started doing Babylon, which was one of my favorite podcasts. And I wanted to ask you, when you guys like talked about doing it at a live audience thing, like did that give you anxiety, or because like that's totally different than
No, that was right in my wheelhouse because, like I mentioned, I came up in sketch and improv comedy and theater, so I had been performing in front of live audiences for years before I ever got into radio.
yeah.
And Kevin, of course, you know, besides being a filmmaker and a podcaster, he's one of the great, you know, in a way, stand-ups because he does an evening with Kevin Smith. Well, he'll get up there and talk about his work and life. You know, he'll do a 2 hour show and plus a Q&A afterwards. So I knew he was great in front of an audience too. So when we decided to do it, I was still doing radio at the time when it happened. And like I said, we had pitched this show and we had been rejected. So we said, well, let's not let that stop us. And Kevin had just bought a little theater on Santa Monica Boulevard here in Hollywood. And he said he wanted to put up live shows there. And that's where the idea for us to do Hollywood Babylon as a live show with an audience came from because he had already had a space. And so
Oh,
we
so
said,
it started at this space?
yeah, the very first
Oh,
show we ever did was in a little black box theater, a little 99 seater on Santa Monica Boulevard that Kevin owned, and it was called the Smod Castle. And that was the first show we ever did was there. And we quickly grew. The audience demand got so large that eventually we had to leave Kevin's own theater to find a bigger space. And that's when we ended up at the John Lovitz Theater, the comedy theater up at Universal Studios, which is no longer there.
yeah.
And then we ended up at the Improv, the famous Improv on Melrose. And now our home is Flappers Comedy Club in Burbank. So we had to find a bigger room because the audience demand. People loved listening to the show, but more than that, they liked being a part of it and being in the room when we recorded it. So we really got lucky.
Yeah, nothing against John Lovitz, but I think it's really weird when you have to call a comedy club to your name to prove to people you're a comedian.
Uh, I have everything against John Lovitz, and you're absolutely right. He was an egomaniac then, and I assume it still is. But he was very much, yeah. Put my name on the windows because I'm a genius. So yeah, we all had to deal with his massive ego. But you're right. It's a weird thing. He was desperate for attention, so he named it after himself. It was very odd.
Yeah, so my only John Lovitz story is he headlined a comedy club in I don't remember. I think it was Temecula the night before that I did it. And I'm not a headliner, I'm just like a closer. So like they call me up if someone cancels and they need a last second, you know what I mean?
Gotcha.
And he left his wallet at this club. And first of all, this is kind of crazy on the comedy club owner, you know. So he played a big part of this. So he said, "Hey Keith, I know you're trying to get Lovitz on your podcast. You want to return his wallet to him?" And I was like, sure, because like, I'm friends with Norm and all that stuff. So like I was like, okay, whatever. So I was like, sure. And it had like $10,000 in it. And I was like, holy Lord, this guy's trusting me with a wallet with $10,000 in cash. So I dropped it off the Beverly Hills Hotel, and because that's where he was staying. And
Right.
like I thought I was going to meet John Lovitz, and I don't know who his assistant is or whatever, so I don't know if someone says, "Oh, they're his assistant." So
Mm.
I was like, "Oh no, I think I'll just hold on to the wallet for John until John comes." And it just turned into this big thing where like the police came and stuff, and I was like, "I don't know this guy at all." You know what I mean?
Oh,
So
wow.
so you would think me driving his wallet that had 10 grand in it, didn't take any of it. He would do my podcast. He never did.
Oh, of course not. No, that's not his mindset.
Yeah, but I was just like, it was an awkward thing for me. And I'm like, oh, wait, why are you know what I mean? Like it put me in a very so he probably hates me. I don't know. I was holding his
No,
wallet.
he doesn't hate anyone. He just loves himself more than everyone. And that's what it always comes down to. If there's something in it for him, then he's interested. Otherwise, not so much. I have so
Yeah.
many stories. I mean, he stopped paying us after a while when we were at the club, and we were the only act that was filling that venue. It was like a 250 seater. It was this massive jazz club that they had turned into a comedy club, and we were the only thing keeping the doors open. And eventually, he just stopped paying us, and we were like, John, we
Yeah.
love you and we love doing the show, but we're going to need to get paid at some point. He's like, well, I'm not making any money. What do you want me to do? Just pay it out of my own pocket? And I was like, yeah, your name's on the club. It's the John Lovitz Club. So own it, son, and reach into that wallet with that $10,000 in it and peel me off a couple hundred.
It probably was around that time too.
I'm
I
sure it
don't,
was. Yeah.
yeah.
I think the reason the club was dying is because he was walking out the back door without all the proceeds.
Yeah. Or maybe the club was dying because I had his wallet. I don't know.
Maybe he couldn't pay the help.
So I apologize, Ralph, if that's
It's all
my
your
fault.
fault.
But I wanted to ask you, like, who is the hardest person you've ever had to interview? Like,
Boy, I had the best of both worlds when I was doing radio
yeah.
because Kevin and Bean, their names were on the door. So it was kind of their responsibility. So they did the majority of the interviews. But I would often have to sort of sit with the talent in the green room and just make small talk and just kind of make sure everybody was comfortable when people came in. And so I never had a problem. I witnessed a lot of bad interviews, but I never really had one. And then when I started my own show, The Ralph Report, I only interview people that I like and know. So I've never had a
Oh,
bad
okay.
interview there. But I remember distinctly Bill Maher coming in to do an interview. And I don't know whether he didn't like being up in the morning or whether he had been up late at the Playboy Mansion the night before or what his problem was. But he was such a prick to everybody. I mean, there were interns, trying to get him a cup of coffee and he was barking at them. He was just a miserable son of a bitch. And
Yeah.
so I was like, wow, it takes so little effort just to be decent to people, especially interns and PAs and people who are making no money and they're trying to get their foot in the door and they're trying to be helpful. To piss on those people, anytime I see that in the industry, it just makes me furious. So I never sort of forgave him for that. And it's changed my opinion of him forever.
Well, especially since like he's a comedian, and usually the comedians are the nicest people of the whole celebrity bunch.
They're
And
supposed to be.
yeah, and he's not a movie star, so I don't know why he would, that's just
And conversely, all the movie stars that ever walked through the doors there when I was doing radio couldn't have been sweeter. I mean,
oh, nice.
you heard so many horror stories about people, and then they would show up, and you're like, I don't know what you're talking about because just couldn't be kinder. And yeah, for the vast majority of celebrities that were on that morning show, almost all of them were at least civil or decent or kind. You don't have to fake enthusiasm and be overjoyed. Nobody wants to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning selling their movie or whatever, but just be professional.
Yeah, definitely. And then one of the cool things that I thought was very interesting about you is you became friends with Adam West and you really helped get him a star on Hollywood. And I wanted to ask you, like, what was that like? Like, how did that come up? Where did you say, "Hey, listen, I've got to do this"? Like, I think that because I think that's so cool.
One of the greatest perks of my career was my friendship with Adam, and it came about so sort of organically. It was really nice. He came in to do the show a couple times at the urging of myself to our producer and the guys who were hosting the morning show because I was a huge Batman '66 fan. As you can
Yeah,
see behind me, maybe
I
you
could
can
see.
see
Yeah,
some evidence of that. And so I always encouraged them to have him on. And I think Adam appreciated the fact that I would go to bat for him and get him on when he was promoting something. And then shortly after we first met at the station, I got hired by Seth MacFarlane to do voices on Family Guy. And he, of course, was the mayor of Quahog.
Yeah,
So
he was on that. Yeah.
we would run into each other in the green room there before we would go in to record our stuff for Seth. And it grew into this sort of genuine friendship that went outside the bounds of show business, and we became pals. And early on in that friendship, I recognized that he didn't have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And I looked at the list of people who do, and I was like, well, this is just unacceptable to me. So I sort of made it my mission as sort of a payback and as a gift for all the joy he gave me over the years as a kid and as an adult, to do something nice for him. And I was able to get to know his daughter, Nina, very well. And she also had a similar feeling about his getting a star. So we worked together. Um, I guess all in, it was probably about 3 years before we finally got the thing to happen.
Wow.
And it was a very special day. And he asked me to be one of the three people to speak on his behalf at the ceremony when the star went into the sidewalk. So it
How cool
was,
is that?
yeah, it was pretty special. It was me, and Seth MacFarlane also spoke, and I forget who the third person was, but it was just a great day. And he always said he didn't care, he didn't matter to him, but I could tell on that day that it was a special thing, and so I was glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they don't care if they have a starter, but I think when they get it, it kind of like makes them think, okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
they may not care actively, but when it's presented to you, when it's offered to you, it's still an honor,
yeah,
and it's a chance for people to pat you on the back and say, "Job well done." And in Adam's case, the fact that he was still around for so long. Batman was a huge thing in the '60s, and then in the '70s and '80s, he really took it on the chin and couldn't get hired, and was doing uh, you know, supermarket openings and car and van shows, selling autographs, trying to keep the bills paid. And then Family Guy sort of introduced him to a whole new audience. And it's like him and guys like him and Shatner and guys from the '60s who found a way and just kept on plugging and kept stayed in the business when so many other people fade away. I think it's to
yeah.
their credit.
I think those guys are examples of like real role models for the industry
I
by
agree.
not giving up and still, you know what I mean?
Keep
So,
working. We know so many people who are in hit shows and then that show goes away and then their career does too. And some people just don't accept that. And they say, well, I'll do what I have to do. I'll go do dinner theater or I'll go to Comic Cons and sign autographs. I'll just keep my face out there. I'll do morning radio. I'll do whatever I have to do to remind people I'm still alive. And eventually the wheel comes around. That's the thing about the entertainment business.
uh,
Um, for example, you listened to me when you were a kid, right, on the radio. And now that you're in a position to have somebody on your podcast, you reached out and asked me to be on. So if you stick around long enough, the people who liked your work when they were kids get into be a position of power, they'll bring you along.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's just one of the things like I'm actually very good about is like I think because like with my because I have a form of autism called Asperger's syndrome, so like I'm not very good at socializing with a lot of people, but the fact
Mm.
that I do stand up, I feel, even though I'm not a name, I still kind of feel like I'm on the same boat as you. Like I feel like
I
I've
mean, it's all the
accomplished,
same.
yeah. So like
I've always felt that way. Early
yeah,
on, what in the radio days, I would feel so intimidated when someone would walk through the door whose work
yeah,
I was familiar with or who I was a fan of. And very early on, I learned, like, well, these are just people doing a job, just like I go to work every day and do a job. There really is no difference other than the amount of money they're being paid.
yeah,
And
yeah, definitely.
but when you boil it down, it's all the same gig. We're all still, stroking out there and trying to make stuff happen. So yeah, it's we're
Yeah.
all in the same boat.
I guess what I'm trying to say is it's easier for me to talk to celebrities than like the girl at the grocery
Oh,
store.
I see what you're saying.
So
Yeah.
like, I
Well,
mean, I
you
don't
have
know.
common ground, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say. Is like I feel like I'm on the same boat with everyone.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you about Batman because you're a huge fan. So you watched that show growing up, and obviously I did too. I wanted to ask your opinion. Did you think it was more of a superhero show, or do you think like deep down it was a comedy?
Both. And I
Yeah,
think that was the reason for its massive success. And Adam always said the same. Um, the fact that the show worked on several levels made it more popular and last longer than a lot of similar shows. You
Yeah.
know, if you go back to like the George Reeves Superman show, the early adventures of Superman, it was a kid's show. And once you grew up, you lost interest in that show. Batman was a kid's show for kids. And then once you start getting older, it would dawn on you at a certain point in your development. You go, oh, now I get it. This is a comedy. This thing's
Yeah.
hilarious. And Adam West's delivery, his deadpan delivery is genius. And you can appreciate it on a whole nother level. So a show that grown-ups can watch and get one thing out of, and then kids can watch and get another thing out of. Well, that's the miracle right there. That's, you know, that's the golden ticket. So it's no surprise to me that it's still appreciated today.
For sure. And I feel like exactly what you said, because it wasn't just Adam West who was great in that show. Everyone I felt was great. Like, you
Yes.
know, the guy who played the penguin, he was like, ah, ah, ah. And you're like, what? You
The
know?
villains, they had these people come in to play the villains. Burgess Meredith was a star of Broadway and had done, you know, movies for decades before he put on that fake nose and that tuxedo. And so you're having these really genius, talented character actors come in to play these villains. And it just supported the whole show. The writing was clever and the performances were outstanding. It just, you know, without that show, you know, Superman, the movie, Richard Donner's movie doesn't happen. And all the Marvel success. I mean, everything is sort of built on the fact that that show proved to Hollywood a comic book property could be a massive hit and make people a lot of money. And that's always the bottom line.
Yeah. And then you also, another interesting thing about you is you co-wrote a Batman comic book. So like
Yeah, that was
how,
that was a real treat. That was another bucket list item that fell in my lap. Kevin Smith, DC Comics reached out to Kevin Smith because they had just finally settled all of the copyright issues with the Batman TV series. For a lot of years, there was no merchandise or anything because there was a legal battle between Warner Brothers, who owned the character, and 20th Century Fox that owned the show, and they couldn't decide how to cut up the pie to make everybody happy. But eventually they did, and when that happened, there was an explosion of merch. You know, Hot Wheels came out with the Batmobile, and they started making action figures and stuff. So DC said, now that we can use the characters, why don't we do a comic book based on the Adam West, Burt Ward Batman and Robin? And
uh,
so they wanted to do a crossover with Batman and the Green Hornet, which had actually been an episode of the series during its 3 years on television. And so they reached out to Kevin Smith, who had written a Green Hornet comic book for another company called Dynamite. And they said, we want to do a Batman 66 Green Hornet sequel, sort of crossover from that show. Would you be interested in writing it? And Kevin, being the endlessly generous person that he is, he said, yeah, I'll do it. But I want to bring in my friend Ralph because he knows more about the Batman 60 show than I ever will. And I think he'd be the right guy to write on this with me. And
uh.
as it ended up, I just sort of ripped it out of Kevin's hands and I said, I know exactly what to do with this. Let me take a shot. And I ended up writing all 6 issues of that pretty much myself. I would send Kevin the scripts and I'd say, this is what I came up with. What do you think? And he'd go, yep, I like it. That was pretty much, he was my editor. You know, he would make suggestions here and there, but he let me run wild with it. And to write words that I could imagine Adam saying on that show, you know, was just such a joy. It was just a blast. And people really liked it too. So that was a bonus.
Yeah, and forgive me because I do not know the answer, but was Adam alive when you finished this? Did he
Yes,
get a chance to
yes,
read it? Oh,
yes, absolutely. He had a chance to see it and he really enjoyed it and had a lot of nice, kind things to say. So
how cool is that? I
doesn't get
mean,
much better.
I
Doesn't
mean
get
that's
much better.
that's like a dream come true, you know, for a Batman fan because you know one of your best friends is Batman, and then you got to write, you know, it's
Yeah.
and I
The
congratulations,
only thing I
man.
had wished was they eventually ended up making Warner Brothers made some animated Batman movies featuring Adam and Bert coming back to do their voices.
Yeah,
And they did two of those. They did one featuring William Shatner as Two Face. I think that was the second one. And I was always sort of hoping against hope that they would take the Batman property that I wrote and do an animated movie based on that comic book and have Adam and Bert actually read the words that I had written. But sadly, Adam passed before that was able to happen. But
yeah. But with the AI now, maybe we could make it
That's
happen,
true. That's
which
true.
is
Although
very scary.
it is very scary. And I think there's a soulless quality to AI that I think still they haven't figured out yet. And I don't think I would want to hear AI take a shot at Adam's performance as Batman. So maybe we'll just leave that be.
No, yeah. Here's why I'm scared of AI because I saw the new Alien movie, and there's a like I don't really know much about the aliens, but there's a actor in it who
Hmm.
apparently died like 5 years ago, but he was in
Yeah,
the first
Ian
one.
Holm is the name of the actor. Yeah.
Yeah, and they AI'd him, and I was just thinking, holy Lord, like that is so scary because it seems like he's a better actor dead than he was alive. I don't know, where it's like,
They did the same thing with Peter Cushing with Grand Moff Tarkin in the Star Wars franchise. They brought him back as AI as well.
oh, did they?
And
Oh,
yeah, it's a very slippery slope. I guess as long as the estates of the artists sign off on it and they get paid something for allowing them to use the likeness, it's okay. But again, I find all that stuff so soulless, and there's a humanity element to performance in particular that I don't care how good it looks, a computer just can't replicate it. So I don't, I'm not a big fan.
yeah. Are you a big fan of how the Star Wars direction's going? Because it seems like there's a new movie every year.
I was never a big Star Wars fan because I was sort of uh, not too old, but I was in my teens by the time the phenomenon really hit, and so I grew up on Star Trek. That was my science fiction, the original series in reruns. So I liked Star Wars, but I was never as fanatical about it as some of my friends are who were younger, who was like they were right in the pocket, 7, 8 years old when that thing exploded.
Oh
So
yeah.
I can watch it and appreciate it, but I'm not really passionate about it. So if a movie comes out, a Star Wars movie that's not so good, it kind of rolls off my back. I like the good ones, not so much the bad ones, but I don't get crazy about it like some people do. They lose their minds.
Well, see, then maybe that's part of my Asperger's too, where like I don't quite understand because I remember hearing you once on the radio, you were talking about how you had a Star Wars poster of Return of the Jedi when it was called
Revenge of the Jedi.
Revenge of the Jedi. And
Yes.
then you were saying that you sold it, and the guy's like, "How much you sell it for?" And you're like, "Ah, $200." And then they're like, "Oh, what have you had now?" And then you said, "Oh, I wish I still had it," or something like
Yes.
that. And I
Yes,
just thought
I
it was the
did.
funniest joke.
It was, yeah, one of the big regrets of my life is selling low and buying high. That's the story of my life. No, but I used to get a lot of movie posters because my dad worked in the movie industry in Philadelphia, where I grew up. And so he had a relationship with this company called National Screen, and they did all the promotional stuff for all the studios. He worked for Paramount, but he would come home with arms full of stuff like press kits and soundtrack albums and posters. And so I would have my room was covered with really cool posters that my dad had brought home from work. And one of those was Revenge of the Jedi. But I also had Rocky and The Godfather and all kinds of stuff all over my room. But yeah, I enjoy Star Wars, but
Yeah.
I wish I had that poster to sell again. That's
And then I wanted to ask you about Tusk because I love Tusk, and
me too.
your scene in Tusk was just so great because like it was a Canadian accent, and then like you kind of overdid it. And I just wanted to know, like, was that written, or did Kevin just say, "Hey, go wild and do your thing"?
No, no, the scene was very written in terms of the characterization. I said to him, "Well, what do you want me to do here?" And he's like, "I don't know. What were you thinking?" Kevin's very cooperative
Yeah,
with performers. He's very open to suggestions and ideas, and he wants you to bring stuff when you come in. If you're doing something, especially a cameo, how do you make it memorable? What do you do with it that makes it fun? And I said, well, I want to do it with a Canadian accent. And he said, well, that scans because that's where the show takes place. And I said, and I want to be a little cartoony. I want to be a little, I was thinking like, Andy Griffith and Barney Fife and Mayberry, sort of like well-meaning but sort of goofy small town cop kind of thing. And
yeah,
he said, "All right, let's try it. And we'll try it a couple different ways and see what works." And Kevin ultimately is his own editor, so he always picks whatever tickles his fancy. And so I did it a couple different ways, but that sort of, oh well, you're having a lot of problems here. Um, just the more broad and sort of you know, funny I got with it, the more he liked it. I think because also that movie is so grim that he looked for moments of levity and comedy to sort of sprinkle in there so that, give you some relief from the tension.
Oh yeah. And so like that movie I would say is considered a horror comedy because it's mostly, the scariness, but the funniness is actually so funny. Like your scene and then, Johnny Depp's scenes, it's just like I was I think when I saw it in the theater, I was laughing out loud and everyone's just looking at me like I don't know, like this is supposed to be scary. I'm just like, this is so funny.
I'm glad you appreciated that, but I think part of that is because the horror is so horrific, for lack of a
Yeah.
better word. It's so disturbing that the comedy stands out even more because there's such a release that comes with something that's humorous when you're dealing with that much tension and grotesque um, horror stuff. So yeah, I think the few funny parts, and Depp is just so good and just so over the top and crazy. And that's one of the things Kevin said to me. I said, I don't want to get too over the top with this character, the Canadian detective. And he said, have you seen what Johnny's doing? He said, don't worry about it. That we've set the bar now for this is what you can get away with. And
Yeah.
then when we did Yoga Hosers, where Johnny came back and reprised his role as Guy Lapointe, and I was playing a deranged Nazi scientist who had been unfrozen after all those years, I said, again, how big can I go with this? And he said, again, you got Johnny Depp with a big prosthetic nose, wearing a beret, being insane. I think you're safe. So
Yeah. Now, does Kevin does he just give you these roles because you're friends, or does he have you audition? And if he has you audition, like, do you have anxiety when you do that?
luckily, Kevin knows me well enough by now. He knows what I can do and what I can't do.
Hmm.
And early on, when he would cast me, I was always wondering, is this just a favor or does he really think I can bring something to this? There's always a little bit of suspicion about why you're getting the gig. But I've very quickly recognized that Kevin doesn't cast anyone in his movies that he doesn't think will add to it, will make it better. So if he brings you in on something, even if you're his friend, he's bringing you in because he thinks you have what it takes. And no, luckily I don't have to audition for Kevin anymore. We've been, you know, close pals for almost 20 years now. So he just calls me up and he says, I got something for you. And I say, just tell me where or when, and I'll be there. And
Yeah.
we do it. And Seth MacFarlane's like that too. Seth just puts me in stuff without making me jump through the hoops of auditioning. So it's nice to have successful friends.
Yeah, definitely. And then I wanted to ask you about the Ralph Report, which is your podcast now, your solo one.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you, like, how much time do you put into creating that? Because each day, right, you
Yes.
release a
5 days
segment.
a week, I do it.
Yeah.
When I got fired at the time, I had a small kid and I was married at the time. And I recognized, all right, I'm out of a job. I got to find a way to earn right away. And so Kevin Smith, again, was one of the guys who said, look, you know what? It's a brand new world. You don't need to wait for a radio station to hire you to do what you do. You can do it on your own. Just put it out there and people will pay to listen to you because you've got a fan base of almost 20 years between Hollywood Babylon and the K-Rock show. He said, your audience is there. Just deliver for them.
Yeah.
And I thought about that. I said, he's got a point, but I wanted to make it, if I was going to charge people for a podcast, because, there's so much free content on the internet. If I was going to ask people to pony up a couple bucks a month to listen to me, I really wanted to deliver and make it something special and worth it. So
Yeah.
instead of doing a weekly show, I said, I'm going to do a daily show. It's going to be like a morning radio show. You'll be able to get into your car every morning, Monday through Friday, when you're going to work and hear me and hear my co-host Eddie Pence and we're going to really work hard to make this special. So I get up in the morning, I take my kid to school, and then I start researching and writing and cutting audio clips, and we usually record it late in the day. Then I start editing and piecing things together, and then we post it at midnight. So even if you're on the East Coast or in Europe or Australia, we've got listeners all over the world. You get it fresh that following day. So I always equate it to like owning a small bakery. You're
Yeah.
going up against the big box stores and you just got to get up in the morning and make the bread, make the donuts, make the pastries, and just keep slugging. So it's a full-time job for sure. But
Yeah,
you know what? Nobody can fire me. And
that's true.
that's worth everything to me.
You can't even fire yourself.
No, I can't.
That's
I will
like
take myself to HR and make a strongly worded complaint.
yeah, it's like yeah. So Ralph, I have three more questions. I do want to respect your time though. Is it cool if I ask these real fast?
Ask away, Keith.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, when you started in this business, what was your biggest fear, and do you still have that fear?
Wow, good question. I was blessed with a genuine ignorance when I got into this business.
Yeah,
I was just too stupid to know how difficult it is to make a dollar as an entertainer. I had just gotten out of college. I packed my stuff up in my car in Philadelphia and I drove across country and landed in LA, not knowing anyone or anything about the city, and just started working it. Just started sending out pictures and resumes, and just with every belief that I would find my way, that things would turn out. And luckily I was right, but I have so many of my friends and I've known so many people in my life where things didn't turn out. If I'd known how much the odds are against you, I
yeah,
think I would have been more afraid. So to answer your question, no, I was not afraid. I was stupid. And sometimes when you're stupid, you don't even know what you're supposed to be afraid of. But
yeah,
that
yeah.
was
That's
that was
so
lucky
true.
accident for me. I was
Yeah,
young and stupid. I recommend that highly.
that is actually so true. Like because everyone is like, I don't know. I would say everyone is scared. Like the top three things are probably death and public speaking, and I don't know something. Like burning in a fire or something. Like these are big
Spiders.
spiders, right? So, but like these are fears that I think just when we're the moment we're alive, that's just put in our head. You know what I mean? But what you said is just so because it's like you gotta live life to a point where you gotta be stupid to not be afraid of these things.
Yeah, if you don't know what you don't know, it's easier. I think the more naive you are and the more idealistic you are, the more you believe you can do anything. It turns out you just might be right. And
Yeah,
here's the truth is, shit's going to happen and life's going to sort of turn out the way it's going to turn out anyway. So why not go for what you love? Why not go for what you want to do? Because at the end of the day, I'd rather fail working hard at something I really enjoy than be a success as an accountant or an insurance salesman or something. I probably throughout my life could have made more money if I had chosen another career, but I sure wouldn't have been any happier. So, and you
yeah.
have to decide what's important to you.
Yeah, you're speaking my language, Ralph, because that's how I am. Like my family's like so here's the thing. My family, that they're a lawyer and a president of a CEO janitorial company. So
There you go.
they're very successful. And like, they think I'm not successful, but I think to myself, well, if you Google me and Google you, more stuff comes up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So like, I
but you
don't
can't you
know.
can't use Google as a barometer of success either.
That's true. But what
Even
I'm
if even if you didn't have a Wikipedia page or any presence on the internet, if you were happy, if you were doing what you enjoyed and enjoyed your life, then that's a win.
That's what I'm
And
trying to say. It's like because my dreams always to do comedy, and like I was very nonverbal growing up, and I've gone
right.
speech therapy and stand up actually really saved my life. You know what I
Oh, that's
mean?
awesome.
So like I find it like regardless if I'm not a national headliner or a huge celebrity, I still feel like for what I've done, I've really accomplished my dream. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the thing is, do what you love and keep working at it and let the other stuff sort of happen or not happen because largely so many things are out of your control in that arena, whether you get a lucky break or whether you get discovered by this guy or the audience finds you or doesn't find you. You can almost never control that aspect of what happens to you, but you can control the work and what you do and what you create and what you put out there. So you got to just focus on that because everything else is, like I said, out of your control and therefore irrelevant because why make yourself nuts over things that you can't affect?
Yeah, definitely. And then my second to last question, Ralph, is what is your favorite meal? Like something that cheers you up no matter what.
Favorite meal?
Yeah, like
Oh,
macaroni and cheese,
no,
chicken
that's
tenders.
an easy answer. I'm a boy from Philadelphia, so a well-made cheesesteak
Yeah.
is the ultimate in comfort food for me. And they're very hard to find on the West Coast. So when I go back east and I go home, I make a point of devouring at least two or three of those to to get my fill because cheesesteaks for sure are my favorite food, hands
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. That's cool. Cause like, there's this place in Texas called Whataburger. So like whenever I go to Texas, I always like gain 30 pounds on Whataburger. So, so I totally understand that. And I just think that's such an interesting question because a lot of people, that's one of those first questions you get asked when you're a child. And
It's
that
true. Yeah.
total,
What's your favorite food?
and
Yeah.
it totally changes when you're an adult. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then my last question for you, Ralph, is if you could go into a time machine and it could be from yesterday or it could be from 10 years ago or when you were a kid and speak to a younger version of yourself, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
Wow. That's a big question. Um, Well, first of all, I would absolutely go back to 10-year-old me and let him know that one day you're going to be very good friends with Batman. That would make 10-year-old me very happy knowing that was going to be in my future.
Yeah.
But in terms of advice, I would say keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you love. And so many things happen to you in life to make you unhappy that you have no control over. Other people or unlucky things or accidents or illness. The world is filled with shit that is meant to bring you down. So if you can find something that makes you happy, do that with all your heart. And even if you can't do it as a profession, do it on the side. If you have to take a straight job because you can't pay your bills, I get that, but then go do whatever it is you like to do. Do it on the weekends or do it after work. Just find a way to keep joy in your life. And so I would give that advice to my young self saying, you found something you like doing, keep doing it and things will work out.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that and you didn't say, "Hey, Ralph, if this kid named Keith Reza asks you to do his podcast, say no."
No, I would definitely suggest that my older self do that. You're fine.
Oh, thank you. Well, where can the folks at home follow and support you at? I know you got the
Yeah,
Ralph Report.
that's the thing. Monday through Friday, if you'd like to hear me and the rest of my friends, the show we do, patreon.com is the place to go. Patreon.com/The Ralph Report. For as little as $3 a month, you can hear the show Monday through Friday. And we have different tiers, including the top 4-star tier, where you get the video version of the show. We do sort of a TV version as well.
Oh,
Kevin
nice.
Smith and I are still doing Hollywood Babylon every month. I'm going to be in Chicago later on this month doing Kevin's Chronicon there in Chicagoland area. So you
Oh,
can find me
nice.
there. And yeah, I'm around. You can find me.
All right. Well, Ralph, thank you for being my best friend for 45 minutes. I really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure, Keith.
All right. Well, have a great day. And, hopefully our paths cross outside the Zoom.
All right. Say hi when you see me.
For sure. Have a great day, Ralph. Thank you.
You too, Keith. Take care.
All right, guys. That was the episode. Subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, and we'll see you guys next week on Razor Riffs.